Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Dharma Helper, and this is DH Reviews. First off, I want to welcome everybody back from their holiday break. It was a long holiday break, but hopefully it was a good one. I know that I enjoyed myself, and I hope that you did as well. With all that being said, let's talk about what you can expect this week, next week, and the week after that on the channel. This week, you can expect my Gotham review, my Scorpion review, and my Agent Carter live stream review on Saturday at 6:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Next week, you're going to get 2 Gallivant reviews and an Agent Carter review, and then the week after that, things are going to normalize as the schedule starts to click back into place and we get a groove back and we start to get back into things after the holiday break. So that's what you can expect for the foreseeable future here on the channel. With all that being said, let's get to the review. This is my Season 1, Episode 11 review of Gotham. If you missed any of my Gotham reviews, there will be a link in the description as well as an annotation behind me on the screen. You can click either of those, and that'll take you right to the playlist that has all of my Gotham reviews in it. With that being said, Gotham, Season 1, Episode 11 was called Rogues Gallery. And in this episode, Jim Gordon, having been reassigned to Arkham Asylum, is working a sort of mystery in that he's trying to figure out who is electrocuting patients in Arkham and giving them electroshock therapy and sending them into comas or sending them into catatonic states or manipulating their behavior in some way where it's a little bit weird and a little bit strange and very Arkham Asylum. And alongside that, a lot of characters in this episode are trying to adjust to the way that things are now that we've seen the mid-season finale and those events. They're adjusting to their station in life, we have Jim, who's adjusting to his station at Arkham Asylum. Penguin, who adjusts to his station, being the right-hand man, almost the right-hand man to Maroni. We have Fish trying to adjust her plans to take over with Carmine Falcone. And Barbara adjusting to her decision to leave Jim and the repercussions of that. So a lot of shifting and moving in this episode. So with that being said, let's talk now about the characters of the episode, and let's begin with Jim, who, as I said, is adjusting to life in Arkham Asylum. But for Jim, it's kind of the same story, isn't it? He's fighting this corruption. It doesn't matter where he is; he's going to fight this corruption. He could be in the GCPD, or he could be in Arkham Asylum. If he sees some kind of corruption, he's going to fight it. And he goes up against Director Lang in this episode, and they have words, and so he sees a lot of the things that are wrong with Arkham, and he starts to bring it up, and he starts to fight about it. And that's just Jim, right? He's going to be fighting the good fight no matter where he is. And again, in this episode, one thing that stood out for me in this episode was Jim going into detective mode and trying to figure out this mystery of who's hurting these patients. And I thought that was something that not only Jim, but I guess as well the writers and the show did really well, was they transitioned us, right, from the GCPD into Arkham Asylum, but the transition was done really well. And that was a concern that I had moving into the second half of the season, was how are they going to transition from a cop drama sort of format with Jim and Harvey working to solve cases, and now it's more of a prison break type show where it's a prison and it's an insane asylum and Jim is a guard. And they did that really well, and Jim did that really well, where his instincts sort of kicked in and he became a detective again, and he's figuring out this mystery and working about suspects and finding clues, and it was really compelling to watch. And Jim did a really good job in this episode, and the writers and everybody did a really good job in this episode, allowing us to experience that transition in a way that made sense logically. And so that was something that really stood out for me for Jim's character, and kind of wrapping up about Jim. Over the course of the episode, it's really clear that he misses the GCPD, that he doesn't want to be there at Arkham for a very long time, that he misses detective work. Not only that, but he misses his partner, Harvey, who's the first person that he calls when he calls the police. And he misses fighting that fight. You know, it's in him as a soldier, as a good person. He wants to be on the front lines. And that was very clear and very well done and very well portrayed in this episode, in the way that he acted, in the way that he did things, and in the way that the show presented things. He misses that fight. And as a soldier, he's gonna jump at the chance to get back into that fight. And hopefully we see that moving forward for the later half of the season. Talking very briefly about Harvey. Harvey also misses his partner. You know, we see that scene where he's drinking, he's very sad, etc., etc. And then as soon as he gets that call from Jim, he's like a kid in a candy store. He's jumping around, he's excited, he's ready to go. And he's giving that director a very hard time. And that was something that I think is an important thing to keep in mind for Harvey. For all of the good that Jim is doing, Harvey is affected by that. And he's rejuvenated by that. And remember, you know, that detective from Spirit of the Goat, that old sort of Harvey, is coming back. And having that separation from his partner is bringing things back to the way that they were. And that's not good for Harvey, and he recognizes that. And, you know, he talks to his boss. He's basically lobbying for Jim. And I think we're going to see more of that moving forward in the later half of the season. Harvey lobbying to get Jim back into the ring here. And to me, the best way I can describe it, right, is a sober companion. Think of Harvey's corruption and his sort of survivalist mentality like alcoholism. Having Jim there in the GCPD, reminding Harvey about the cop that he used to be, the sober, straight cop that he used to be, kept him sober in a manner of speaking, kept him straight in a manner of speaking, and brought him back to the detective that he was. And now he's getting that drink again. He's getting that idea of, you know, you have to be a hard cop. You have to play by Gotham City's rules. And that's not good for him. As much as, you know, alcohol isn't good for an alcoholic. And that's the thing that I took away from Harvey in this episode, is that that analogy of an alcoholic falling back into the alcoholic state. And speaking more of the characters here that are affecting Jim and that are affected by Jim, let's talk about the newest addition to the cast, Leslie Tompkins. Dr. Leslie Tompkins is a doctor, the female ward of Arkham, and she works with the male ward when they're understaffed. And in the lore of Batman, from what I understand, Dr. Leslie Tompkins is a doctor with her own clinic, and she heals people and she helps people, not just the good guys, but also, you know, the bad guys. Anybody pretty much can come into that clinic and get healed up and get the treatment that they deserve. She's a very honorable person. I think it was the War Games story, you know, where she has that idea of no violence in her clinic and et cetera, and all this stuff, and she treats whoever comes in, and she's very much against that idea of straight up Batman vigilanteism. You know, again, I don't read comics religiously or anything like that, so I'm just kind of going off the things that I remember or the things that I was told. So she's sort of a straight edge, sort of black and white, this is the way that things have to be done, kind of like Jim is, in the way that he's a police officer and he does things by the law. She sort of mirrors that in medicine and very takes her oath of, you know, do no harm very seriously. And I think the two of them have a lot of good chemistry. And honestly, they make a better pairing than Jim and Barbara do. And I think that's what they were setting up here in this episode and moving forward, is that romantic interest between Dr. Tompkins and Jim. And Dr. Tompkins is a really interesting character, and I want to see more from her and what she's about. Again, she reminds me very much of Jim, and so I think the two of them working together is going to be pretty cool to watch, and I think they're going to be staunch allies here during Jim's stay in Arkham, and perhaps moving forward once he gets out. And so if, like Harvey was to Jim in the GCPD, and it was important for Jim to have allies, I think Dr. Tompkins is going to be his biggest ally and his most important ally and friend here in Arkham Asylum, and hopefully they can reform it much in the way that Jim and Harvey were trying to reform the GCPD. And hopefully they have more success in that regard, and we can see a better Arkham Asylum, or one that more closely resembles the one that Batman deals with, where it's not in shambles as much in this episode. So that's Dr. Tompkins for this episode. Really cool character. Glad she's in the show. Glad we get to see what she can bring to the show. Let's wrap up this discussion here by talking a little bit about Barbara. And Barbara in this episode completely loses me. I mean, I was on board there for a second, and I could understand it for a second, but this episode, you're gone. You're lost. She has no loyalty for Jim. She's bad-mouthing Jim to Montoya. She's probably high off her mind. And then that scene where she called Jim's house and the penthouse, and Ivy answered, and she basically told an 8-year-old to go to hell. Like, if you don't understand that that's an 8-year-old on the phone, if you can't tell the difference in voice between an 8-year-old and like a hooker or whatever the case is she thought it was when she was, I assume, high, then you got problems, and she's got problems in this episode. She's bad-mouthing Jim, like I said, and it just doesn't make sense. The thought process there does not make sense. And that was probably the weakest part of the episode, was the Barbara storyline. Not only with the whole thing about Jim and how that makes no sense, and how you have no loyalty for Jim anymore, and you assume that Jim's sleeping around, and you're so offended that Jim's sleeping around when you yourself went to one of his co-workers and slept around and snuck around and all this stuff. But now, let's talk about her and Montoya. That was a little bit too rushed for me. The relationship between those two, I thought that was going to be carried out over this next half of this season, and it's over in like a scene. It's over like that. And she pretty much blows up on Montoya. And Montoya, while I'm not going to go ahead and defend her snatching up Barbara from Jim, that wasn't cool, but Montoya gets really disrespected in this episode by Barbara. And that wasn't cool, Montoya is trying to get her life together, and she recognizes that Barbara and Montoya, they're not good for each other. Again, going back to that idea of alcoholism and drug abuse, etc., etc. You get two personalities like that together, and they're not gonna do anything but drugs. Because that's what brought them together in the first place, was that they love drugs, and they love partying and drinking and all this stuff. And so the best thing for them, and Montoya recognizes this, although, again, in my opinion, a little too soon, is to separate. And Barbara doesn't take that very well, probably, again, because she's high off her mind on pills or whatever. I mean, there was that scene where they were resting and they got the spilled pill bottles on the counter, and she just blows up on Montoya, and the whole thing, apart from Barbara's erratic sort of behavior, felt very rushed, and that was not something that I would have expected out of Gotham, which was in my opinion, setting things up very casually and carefully over that first half of the season. So that was something that disappointed me in this episode, but I'm not going to linger on it too much. Again, it's the first season. They're finding their footing, and hopefully they find their footing very quickly here, and this isn't a larger problem in the future. So that's Barbara and Montoya. Let's very briefly talk about Kat and Ivy, I guess, bringing those guys up. Kat helps Ivy in this episode, gets her out of the street and into Jim's house, and drives her off. And very briefly talking about that, that is a sort of call forward or a call back, depending on the way you look at it, to the relationship that Catwoman and Poison Ivy have. From my understanding of them in the comic books and everything like that, they have a very close relationship. And they're very close friends. And it was nice to see that. And that the show is taking these relationships, with Bruce and Catwoman, and then with Catwoman and Ivy, and Jim and Harvey, and Jim and Tompkins. They're taking these relationships very seriously, and taking the material very seriously. And they're very careful about the way that they present these things. And that care and that love and that respect for the source material shines through in these little nods that they're doing. And that sort of relationship is a nod, I think, that went over really well. And I want to see them continue that moving forward here, because Ivy is an interesting character, and she has a lot of problems, and she's got a long way to go. And the obvious choice for the person to take her on that journey is her longtime friend, Kat. So that was really cool to look at, and really, really awesome for this episode. So with all of those characters sort of out of the way, let's talk about the Mafia side of things. Let's begin with Penguin. As I said, this is sort of a transition episode, and Penguin is, if you'll pardon the pun here, testing the waters of his new position here with Maroni, and he ends up reaching a little bit. And I think that's a theme here, in this episode at least, with the Mafia sort of underboss, sort of underworld characters, is their reach exceeding their grasp. And with Penguin, his reach exceeds his grasp. He thinks he can boss these pier guys, these fishermen around, and with impunity, and he can't. And Maroni puts him in his place and says, look, you're not the boss, I'm the boss. You're a monkey. I'm the zookeeper. I'm big, you're small, I'm right, you're wrong. Like that movie. And, it reminded me a lot of Fish's relationship with Penguin. And that subordinate, superior relationship. And hopefully, Penguin doesn't fall back into that, because that did not end well for him with Fish. And that relationship there with Fish and Penguin is rocky, and it's going to end in bloodshed, and hopefully Maroni and Penguin iron things out. I think they could be friends, right? They work well together. They have nice chemistry. The idea of those two characters together is fun to watch always, just because of the way that they interact. And, hopefully the Penguin's plans and his ambitions aren't muddied by the fact that he's once again a little bit of a subordinate. Hopefully, take one on the chin, guy. Oswald, just take one on the chin. You were wrong. Your ambition is a little bit too much. You flew a little too close to the sun here. Maroni's right. You're wrong. Just take it on the chin. Move on. Maroni seems to have moved on. And learn and grow from this. You have to, one step at a time, guy. And that's Penguin for this episode. One step at a time. Don't get too far ahead of yourself. And so let's talk about Fish. And more specifically, let's talk about Gil. Butch Gilzan in this episode is probably the most important, more important than Fish. So let's talk about Fish and Gil. In this episode, her plan to sort of overthrow Carmine takes a bit of a turn. And she no longer has the support of Nikolai, and Nikolai, who was going to be her stooge, was going to be much easier to prop up than she was. And at this point, with the taxes as high as they are, the support is there for a coup. The question just remains, who's going to replace Carmine? Obviously, Fish wants to be replaced. Wants to replace Carmine. This one guy wants to replace Carmine, and then there's another guy here who's in the middle. And so Fish says that she could convince this other guy in the middle to side with her, but the one guy that's making noise is going to be a problem. Butch says, I'll talk to him, I'll handle it. Turns out these guys are old friends, and this one guy offers Butch a deal. He says, Fish, her reach, again going back to that theme, her reach is exceeding her grasp here. And she doesn't have what it takes. She's not going to be able to take charge after Carmine dies or after Carmine is overthrown here. So side with me. We're long-time, lifelong friends. You're a smart guy. You recognize that Fish is a sinking ship. Jump ship. I'll give you a club. I'll give you a crew. We can work together like we did in the old days. We're old friends. And so the question that Butch has to answer in this episode is Fish a smart investment? Honestly, I think even though ultimately Butch ends up killing his friend and siding, it seems, with Fish, I think he's having second thoughts, right? His idea is that what's best for Butch is the best decision to make. And, he says one thing to Fish. He says, I'll talk to this guy. I'll get him on side here. And then he does another thing. He kills the guy. And ultimately, that's the telling factor for me. If he was on Fish's side, he would have talked to the guy and talked things over. Instead, he killed the guy. And that tells me that he's working for Butch. And when it comes out that this guy's dead, that's not going to go over well for Fish and for her plans. So that's why I think he's working for Butch. He killed the guy, and that's not going to go over well for Fish. I think Fish's plans here are hanging on to a thread. She can get that other guy to convince that other guy to come on board, but again, things are coming to light here. Carmine is going to find this dude dead. He's going to say, who killed him? Why did he die? Things are going to come to light. Butch did that intentionally, I think, to undermine Fish. And Fish's plans are going to come to light here, and Carmine's going to get wise. And it's just a matter of time before Fish is snuffed out. And when she is, I think Butch is going to be in a position to do what all good mobsters do and go with the flow and strike out on his own. He's got more support, I think, than Fish does. They were having that conversation, and the guy said, you've got your crew, and think about it. Without your crew, without your connections, what is Fish? And, we're friends, and so he's got connections on all sides here. And I think he's going to start using those connections to betray Fish. No honor among thieves, right? So that kind of covers it for my thoughts on characters in this episode. Overall, nice episode, solid entry in the second half of the season. Really stumbled with that Barbara storyline, but overall, really interesting episode. I did want to mention this. The guy at the end of the episode, the electrocution dude, wasn't caught. And something that caught my eye and sort of brought my attention was, rather than the villain of the week format that we got in the first half of the season, where it would be one case, 1 week, and done, this looks like this is going to be a recurring, serious villain. This guy is brainwashing people, and he's got his crew together, and he's a straight-up sociopath, and he's a formidable villain. And seeing that is going to be really cool. I think to see if they can present a villain that is recurring and very serious and very dangerous and not your sort of run-of-the-mill thug. Almost a Batman-level villain, really, isn't he? This guy who can do all this cool stuff, and he's a very methodical sort of dude, one step ahead at every turn here. It's shades of the Rogues Gallery, isn't it? The Rogues Gallery being a reference to Batman's sort of arch nemesis and his villains and the people that he deals with. It's shades of that, and that's something that really impresses me overall, I think, with Gotham, is their evolution from the early beginnings of things and the early ways of things, and now we're slowly evolving into more and more of the Batman era, and things are starting to take shape, and that is really cool. So that kind of closes out my thoughts on the episode. What did you guys think about the episode? Let me know in the comments section or on Twitter at the DH Reviews. If you enjoyed this review, leave a thumbs up. It really helps me out and gets the channel out there, etc., etc. If you want to share this video on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr. Get the channel out there, grow the channel for the second half of the channel here, moving into the second half of a lot of these shows. With all that being said, again, the next thing that you can expect on the channel is the Scorpion review coming up tomorrow, and then on Saturday, the Agent Carter live stream review at 6:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So again, comment down below with your thoughts on the episode and your thoughts on my review. Leave a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel if you want to watch more of these reviews. I do Gotham reviews, Scorpion reviews, Constantine reviews, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Agent Carter, Better Call Saul. A lot of shows coming up here in the very near future. So if any of that kind of piques your interest, subscribe to the channel and just see those reviews as they come out. With all that being said, thanks very much for your support and your patience, guys. I appreciate it very much. And with all that being said, I've been Dharma Helper. This has been DH Reviews, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.